G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kaitlyn and I'm an American living in beautiful Sydney, Australia. And as a lot of Aussies do like to point out, America is very America focused, especially when it comes to history and learning history. So there are some historical facts that I thought were true for the longest time that turned out actually weren't true. So today's video is going to be an interesting one. 8 false American history facts you always thought were true from the channel Grunge. So let's give this video a thumbs up before we react to it. I'm excited to see what's on this list. I'm wondering what sort of facts I threw in there, if maybe there's something that I actually already knew. So let's see if you guys know any of this too. Grab a Becky, grab a cuppa, and let's get right into this video.
Betsy. Every school kid knows Betsy Ross created the first US flag at George Washington's request, right? Wrong. Turns out that while Ross was a Philadelphia-based flag maker, which is apparently a job people can have, there's no actual evidence that she had anything to do with the American flag's creation. Ross's grandson spread the story almost 100 years later, and his only evidence were testimonials from family members. Somehow a ridiculous family legend made its way into the history books, and as a result,
everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
So who did design the flag if it wasn't crazy Grandma Betsy? Evidence points to Francis Hopkinson, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He actually sent the government a bill for his design work, asking to be paid with a big old barrel of wine. Now that's a true patriot. Surrender?
So I actually did know that. So the Betsy Ross house is in Philly. It's a very big popular tourist site, so obviously they're going to keep it going. They're getting a good bit of money off of this. But no, a lot of people, I think it's a little bit more common knowledge than not that Betsy Ross wasn't the actual designer of the first flag. She might have sewn it, but she wasn't the original designer. I didn't know that he was the original designer though. Especially didn't know that he was paid in wine. I think that's really interesting. But I did know that she didn't actually design the first flag. I don't know if she actually sewn it, but she definitely didn't design it.
Why? Usually when the general of an army surrenders, the war ends. At least that's what it's like whenever a game of Risk goes on for longer than 3 hours and everyone just wants to stop and just go out for pizza already. Anyway, history says the American Civil War ended when General Robert E. Lee surrendered after the Battle of Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia on April 9, 1865. But that didn't stop that wacky Confederate army from fighting on. That included a 2-day confrontation known as the Battle of Palmetto Ranch in Texas. The Confederates actually won that battle, despite the war having been officially over for a month. This is kind of like staying on the field after the game's over and the stands are empty just to hit a few dingers. It's impressive, exciting, and completely pointless. Talk is cheap, babe.
So I mean, that one kind of makes sense. If you're in Appomattox, Virginia, and then you have all the way in Texas, like you have to travel by horseback, by wagon or something to get the news to Texas, so that there was a battle 2 days later. It's not really that surprising with that much of a difference. I mean, it's definitely not the most shocking fact out there. It's honestly barely like a fact that you thought was true. I mean, the surrender did happen. It just took a little while for the news to travel to all of the troops that were out there. Really not that big of a deal.
President Abraham Lincoln presented the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. But who was emancipated? Only slaves in Confederate states. You know, the states that had decided they weren't a part of America anymore and wouldn't listen to the president no matter what he said.
My presidential bitch!
Not only that, but the slave-holding states loyal to the Union, Delaware, Missouri, Maryland, and Kentucky, were still free to enjoy all the slavery they wanted. The U.S. finally made good on the proclamation's promise years later when it ratified the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. Though, when it comes to things like slavery, better late than never still feels pretty hollow. False flag.
Did not know that. By the time I thought the proclamation went out, I thought all the Union states had basically abolished slavery. I didn't know that. I wasn't aware that slavery was still a thing in some states at the time that had happened. Obviously, I knew the 13th Amendment was what had abolished slavery legally in the states, but I did not know that. That's pretty surprising, and I mean, dark point in American history, guys. Dark point in American history.
You may think that the flag you spot on the backs of sunburned men, on women named Riley, and on the top of the car from the Dukes of Hazzard was once the official symbol of the Confederacy. You'd be dead wrong though, bro.
Wrong again.
In fact, that red background with the blue X and all the stars is actually the Confederate battle flag, the banner that the Army of Northern Virginia, led by General Robert E. Lee, flew during conflicts. The official flag of the Confederacy actually changed 3 times during the American Civil War, but having 3 different designs would make it harder to sell at truck stops in Alabama. Better to use the one from TV.
I mean, no wonder they lost. They couldn't even decide on which flag to use. And I mean, they went through 3 flags in the span of 4 years. Were you guys more busy arguing about which flag to use? I mean, just saying, it's also incredibly dumb. Like, even when I was in America, this is long before I moved to Australia, it's so dumb to use a Confederate flag, a symbol of an army that completely lost, that only existed for 4 years. Like, it's racist. Flat out, it's not celebrating your heritage or your pride or anything. No, it's flat out racist.
Rushing Russians. Some folks think that the United States and Russia have never met on the field of battle, with the exception of Rocky and Bullwinkle trying to get one over on Boris and Natasha. Not true. President Woodrow Wilson sent thousands of U.S. troops to Russia in September 1918, along with soldiers from France, Great Britain, and Japan. Their mission was to support Russia's White Movement, a force of anti-communist Russians opposed to the Bolsheviks, forerunners of the Soviet Union's Communist Party that had seized power during the October Revolution. It didn't work though, and the bulk of the Allied forces pulled out of Russia by 1920. America got the last laugh though, casting Russians as bad guys in movies ever since. Take that, Russia.
So honestly, as an American, I'm so tired of that Russian stereotype. I actually have a friend, she's from Serbia, and we were talking about this just last month. The idea that all Russians are like secret agents or spies or part of some communist Cold War regime. It's so overdone. Like, at this point, why is it still a trope in Hollywood? It needs to end. It needs to die. Like, that's just something that they need to stop doing. It's so untrue. It's so unfair. And as far as World War I goes, I know very little about World War I. I'm learning a little bit more of it now that I've moved to Australia. It's just something that you pick up between Anzac history and hearing about Gallipoli and whatnot. You're learning a little bit more about World War I. Did not know that, though. Interesting.
Lucky 13. We all know the song.
50 nifty United States from 13 original colonies.
That song is a lie. There were only 12 colonies at the outset of the American Revolution in 1775. Delaware at that time was actually part of the colony of Pennsylvania, not becoming independent until June 1776. And that's all anyone knows about Delaware, actually.
I'm in Delaware.
I mean, I could see where this one came from because the Declaration of Independence was signed on the 4th of July, 1776. So by the time the Declaration was signed, there were 13 colonies. That's interesting to know because as somebody from Pennsylvania, I had no idea that Delaware was a part of Pennsylvania all the way up until 1776. So interesting, the things you learn, the things you know. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's something that you thought was true but wasn't. I think that's more of just a technicality. In fact, I think so far a lot of these have just been technicalities, but I guess it's a little bit tough to find 8 facts that you always thought were true that aren't, especially like well-known, wide, popular facts. So let's see what the rest of these are.
His claim. It's true. Thomas Jefferson, or TJ as he liked to be called, used to grow hemp. Some folks even claim that the first drafts of the Declaration of Independence were written on hemp paper, and that maybe the official declaration itself was too. Sorry, Shaggy, but the Declaration of Independence is written on parchment, not hemp. And no, the Constitution is not written on hemp either. On the other hand, everything that Nicolas Cage did in National Treasure actually happened.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
So, at least there's that. Crack up.
Okay, so I did actually know that. I knew that the Declaration of Independence, that the Constitution were all written on parchment. I know that there was that rumor about it being hemp, but it wasn't. I think that they used hemp for like cheaper drafts, like it was cheaper and easier to use than paper, so they used it for drafting. But no, it was actual parchment that was used for the Constitution.
Up. As a symbol of America's enthusiasm for freedom, Philadelphia's Liberty Bell is pretty rad. Legend has it that the bell cracked after patriots rang the thing too hard on July 4th, 1776. Too bad, that's a load of garbage. The bell actually started cracking years earlier, starting in 1752, and required constant maintenance during its run in the Pennsylvania State House. The crack you see in Philadelphia's famous bell today likely occurred in the 1840s. The Liberty Bell was the equivalent of that car that you need to constantly throw money at to keep working, but the Liberty Ford Pinto doesn't have quite the same ring to it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Okay, was not expecting a massive car crash at the end of that, but okay, that's one way to end a video. I obviously talked about the Liberty Bell quite a lot in my history classes growing up in the States, particularly in elementary school. So I didn't know that that crack in it was a myth. It was more from the actual construction and design of the bell itself, not from it actually being rung on July 4th. Although I did think they did ring it on July 4th, I know that crack wasn't because of July 4th. So yeah, there's some things in this I didn't know. Some things I think are really more just technicalities, not so much false facts. But yeah, I definitely learned a few things from this video. I thought it was really, really good, you guys. So if you guys liked this video, please hit the like and subscribe button down below. I really, really do appreciate the support, you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.